Okay, so we should be live now. So what we're going to be building today is a layout type of system. So if you don't know what that is, basically when we're creating files in HTML, there's certain things like the nav bar or the footer that we don't want to retype every single time in each file we make. So for example, if we have an index page, a contact page, and an about page, we don't really want to retype that whole navbar code inside each of those three pages. So what I want to do here is create some type of system where we can keep all of our layout inside of one file, and then we just put the code that we want for each specific page inside of those pages. So all of the head and body and all of that should only be inside the layout file, and only the tags which we're using in our main page should be in, for example, the index page. And I know this is a little confusing right now, but basically what I mean is like this dashboard up here, this navigation bar. If we were building this page, I'd want this to be in its own layout file, not in each page. And then only the content down here should be in the page we're creating. So let's go ahead and try and create a system to do that. First, let's create a new repository here in GitHub for our project. And I'm going to call this client-side layout system. And for the description here, I'm just going to say a layout system built in JavaScript. So I'll leave this as public. We can add a README here. And yeah, for a license, I don't really care what this is licensed as. Let's just go with GNU 3. Let's create this. Okay, so now we want to pull this repository we just created into our folder here. So this is just a folder that I keep my JavaScript projects in. There's only one here right now, but I want to right click and select open in terminal here. And in here, I'm just going to clone this repository. So I'll copy this. And I'll do git clone and let's paste that in. Okay, it seems to be cloned correctly. Let's head into this folder and let's right click open in terminal here. Inside of the project folder, we open in terminal and then we do code and a dot to open this up in VS Code. So in here, there's two things we basically want to create. One is the layout file and one is a file to test that the system is working in. So I'm firstly going to create a folder here and we'll call this, let's just call it main. And inside of it, I'm going to create a file and we'll call this layout.html. And if you're following along, name your file layout.html as well. This is going to be the layout where our main HTML lives in. So let's just fill that in right now. Again, if you don't know how to do that, you hit Shift and 1 on the keyboard and it brings up this exclamation mark, and then you just hit Tab and it will auto-complete this layout here. So I'm going to save this. Next, I want to create another file in the same main folder here. And we'll call this test.html. So this is the file we're going to be using to test from right now. And before we do anything here, I just want to make sure that it's connected to Git correctly. So let's try and push this up and see if the files appear there. So in the same terminal we used to open up VS Code here, let's do git add dot and then git commit -m, and for the message here we'll just say added some files and we'd enter, and then we'll say git push. Okay, and it looks like it pushed that up correctly. Let's go check that out in GitHub. I'll refresh the page here. And yeah, we have the main folder here now. So everything looks to be connected properly. Let me just pop out the comments here just in case anyone decides to say something. Okay, so let's head back to our code now. And we want to leave that terminal open so we can keep pushing stuff up to GitHub later. But now in our layout file, we have the basic HTML template here. And down here, we want to create a div and we want to give it an ID. So I'm going to call this app. You can really name this ID whatever you want, but we're going to be using this later. So remember what you put here for the ID. It's just, it's similar to what they use in React. So I'm just naming it the same here. Yeah, let's name that app. And in the test file, for right now, I'm going to be writing the JavaScript inside of this file. Later on, we'll move the JavaScript out of this file and into its own .js file. So for right now, what I want to do is create just a div here. So no HTML, boilerplate, none of that, just this div. And inside of this div, I want to give it an ID of, let's say, content here. Or let's call this app as well, since it's the same thing. We might need to change that later because remember we're going to merge these two files and we can't have two things with the ID of app. But we'll figure that out as we go along. So inside of this div with the ID of app, let's just put a h1 here and we'll say test page. And then we'll put a p tag as well. And we'll say test content. And then down here I want to open up a script tags. And inside of these script tags, basically I just want to grab these two tags here. Now how do we get these? You might note that you can do document.getElement.id .inner HTML, and that's how we'd get this text here. But if we actually do that to the main div here, what's the inner HTML of this? It's both of these tags down here. So in the script here, I'm going to say let content equal to, and I'm going to say document dot. Actually, let's grab this app thingy here first. So I'm going to say let app equal to document.getElement by ID, and the ID is app here. And then on the next line, I'm going to create another variable. We'll call it content, and I'll set this equal to app.innerHTML. Now there's a reason why I'm grabbing the inner HTML here. That's because even if we delete everything here, this variable will still contain it in it. So even if on the next line here we say app.innerHTML is equal to null, null means nothing. It's going to remove all this from here, but this content variable will still have all of that inside of it. So that's why I'm saving it into this content variable right here. So once we've created that, I'm going to create two buttons to test this. So let's do a function down here and we'll call it clear. Actually, let's call it clear content because there might be a function in JavaScript called clear. And we open up our curly brackets here. And for this function, what I wanted to do is set app.innerHTML to null. So app.innerHTML is equal to null. And I want to create another function here called bring, let's call it add content. And the reason for this function is to bring the content back by using this variable here. So now we're going to say app.innerHTML is equal to content. So now we have a way to test that the idea I spoke about is working or not. So here after the div, let's create two buttons just to test with. And this button will say clear, and then for the on click on it, we want to call this function here clear content. Let's copy it and paste it there. And then we want another button down here. Remember to autocomplete these tags. You type out the name of the tag like button, and then you press tab and it will just fill out those tags for you. So for this button, I'm going to type data. I don't know what, you can type whatever you want here. And then on click, we're going to set it equal to the add content function that we created here. So now let's start up the live server and test this. If we hit clear here, it should remove all of this. And if we hit this data button, it should bring it all back. Okay, so that's working perfectly. And that confirms our idea that this content variable here is storing this data even when it gets deleted with this function. And that's exactly what we want to happen. The reason why we want it to happen is, remember, we want all of this HTML here to be imported into this page, basically deleting everything here. And then after we paste it in here, we want this copied content, which is in this content variable, to be pasted inside of this app div here, if that makes sense. Basically, we want this test page to become the layout page with this inside of the app here. Okay, I know I'm explaining that a bit badly, but hopefully everyone catches on to what I'm saying. So now that we know how that's done, firstly, let me get rid of this add content function here. We don't need it, but we will keep this clear content here. And let's get rid of this button as well. And now let's create a new function down here. Actually, it's not a function. We want to use a function called fetch. We want to use fetch, not create a new function. And fetch basically allows us to fetch something on the internet. So we're not going to fetch something on the internet. We're going to fetch something inside the same folder as us. So we just need to type the file name here. So our file is called layout.html. Now this is probably the first time you're using the function fetch. So what this will do is it will return a promise. It won't just simply go fetch this file and give us the output right now. It will return a promise, which you can see here. And what a promise is basically it doesn't yet have the data, but it will get that data later on and give it to us. But we need that data right now, so we actually want our program to wait until it's done fetching that data. So we need to use .then. And what this does is any code we want it to do after it's done fetching that data needs to go in this .then function here. And a better way of doing this is actually to put it onto the next line. And we just leave a small tab here so that we know this .then is connected to the fetch statement here. Okay, and also another reason why we do it like this is because you might have multiple .thens. So you don't want that creating one huge line here. It's better to neatly format it this way. So let me get rid of one of those. And inside of this .then, we basically need to put a function in here. So I'm going to write this function a bit strangely, especially if you haven't seen anonymous functions before, but I'll explain it while I'm typing it here. So this function will take one variable as a parameter, and we'll call this variable response. And then we need to use the equals to sign here and the greater than sign. And here we have two options basically. We can use these curly brackets and put our function code in here just like a normal function would do, or we can directly write something here like content. And what this will do is directly writing the word content here is the same thing as doing this basically. We return content. So instead of typing out this whole thing here and typing return content, what we can do is we just type out the thing we want to return, like content. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everyone. And here what we want to return is this response, which we're taking in as a variable, response.text, and this is a function here. So okay, what's this going to do right now? When we fetch something, right, it's going to fetch this layout.html file, and it'll like take a second to fetch this. So at first it will just be a promise, and then that's why we use this keyword then. We'll have actual data back from this fetch. So in other words, this fetch is actually returning something. And inside of this then function here, we're taking one parameter, which is going to be whatever this fetch returns. So this response is the response we're getting from fetch. And then we're returning whatever the text inside of that response is. Now if you hover above text here, you'll actually see a word here called body. And that's because this response object, it has many parts to it. Like for example, it will say if the response is successful, and it will also like give an error code or whatever and all of that. We don't want any of that, we just want the text that's inside of it. So that's why we're using response.text here. So remember, this is returning it. So we want to take it in as a parameter of something else now. So on the next line, we're going to make another dot then. So again, let me explain. The fetch is fetching this. It's fetching this file, the content of it. We're then waiting for it to finish fetching that file. We're waiting here. And then we're getting the text from inside of it. And we're returning it to this next dot then function. And in here, I'm going to call this variable response as well. You can really name both of these variables whatever you want. I'm just calling it response. But if you wanted to name this like even spoon, for example, you can name it that and then just say spoon.text, yeah. Whatever, it doesn't really matter what you name it. So we're taking response in as a variable here. And here we want to use our curly brackets, because here we're not just returning something, we want to run some code. So what do we want to do here? We want to basically delete everything here, minus the script. But we don't really need to take the script into consideration here, it will handle itself. We just want to clear this page. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to set document element. And if you read what this document element does here, it gets the root node of the document. So it's basically grabbing the entire document as a whole here. Root meaning the entire document, everything here. And we're going to say .inner HTML is equal to response. Where's response coming from? It's coming from here. And from before this, it's coming from here, which is returning the text that we get from this file here. I hope that really makes sense to everyone. I know this is a bit confusing, but let's just see where it goes. And actually, let's put this whole thing inside of a function, because we don't just want it to run randomly. We want it to run when we press a button for now. For now, we want it to run when we press a button. But when we're actually putting the system out there, we don't want it to be connected to a button. So for right now, let's create a function. We'll call it add layout. And let's copy and paste this code into there. Okay, everything is formatted correctly. And let's make a button up here. So button, and we'll say add layout. And then for the on click here, I want to set it equal to this function we just created. So I paste that in. Now let's go reload the page, and we'll click this add layout button here. And okay, it makes the page blank, so we can't tell yet whether it's working or not. But let's go add something into that layout file so that we can see whether it's getting the content or not. So I'm going to create an H1 here, and I'm going to say hello from the layout file. I'm going to save this. Okay, and now it's pulling in that layout file correctly. And if you notice the name up here, we're still staying on the test page, which is what we want to see. Now, there's one thing we did wrong here, which is in this test file, we're not using this clear function, but we did want the other function that we made. We already deleted that, so let's just write it again. Function, actually no, we don't need any function here. We just need the one add layout function. And inside of here, after we clear the document here, we want to add a new line of code here. And we want to document dot query selector. So query selector is different from get element by ID. What query selector does is we can give it either an ID or a class, and it will go check if something like that exists in the file. So we use query selector when we're not sure if that thing exists or not. We're just saying like query if it exists or not, and if it does exist, then give it to us the same way we use get element by ID here. So the selector we want is this ID of app here. So to do this, we want to add in our quotes here, and we want to use hash app. Now notice when we use get element by ID, we don't need to use the hash here, but when we use query selector, we do need to use the hash here for an ID. If this wasn't an ID, we don't need to use the hash here. And then we want to say dot inner HTML is equal to, what's it going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to this content here. Because remember, this content is saving whatever's inside here. So even when this line of code here clears out our entire HTML, we're still going to have it inside of this content variable here. So let's set the inner HTML to content here. Okay, and now before we run this, let's try and picture what this does. So this first line of code here, it deletes everything in the file. It's all gone. And it replaces it with the response object here, which is the file, this layout file. So now we have just this inside of our file. And then on the second line of code, it grabs this element with the ID of app. So this element here. And in the inner HTML of it, it adds in our content, which is what we stored up here. So basically we're storing the stuff we need, we're getting rid of everything, we're putting the new file in, and then we're taking the stuff we stored and putting it into the template. So let's go see if that works. So when I click this add layout button, we should still see these two things here, but we should also see hello from the layout file. And yes, it works perfectly. If you're wondering why the button vanished down here, it's no longer here. It's because when we clear all the content here, we're putting back the content we saved here, but this button is not inside of that div, so it's not being saved. And that's fine, we just made this button to test with, so it's fine for it to be out here. And now there's one more thing we want to test to make sure this is working correctly. Right now, if we press that button, it puts hello from the layout file down here. But what if we wanted to put it up here at the top so that we could use it as a nav bar? Let's go back to our layout file and let's try and move this up to the top. So I'm going to delete it from there. And now I'm going to paste it above this div with the ID of app here. So h1, and I'll say this is our nav bar. And then at the bottom here below the div with the ID of app, I'm going to create another h1 and I'll say this is our footer. This is, obviously we're not going to use an h1 for the footer and for the nav bar, but it's just an example to test that this is working the way we want. So I'm going to reload here, press the button, and you can see here at the top it put our nav bar, and here at the bottom we put our footer. And yeah, with that, this is kind of complete. Now we do want to start moving our code into its own JavaScript file. But before this, I just want to mention that right now we're just using these two lines of code here to test. But you could do all sorts of things here, like you could import your CSS file here, you could do whatever you want. And then no matter how many files we create here, we just need to attach that script to it and it would automatically bring all of this layout in for us. Okay, so let me get rid of this random link I typed up here. And let me quickly have something to drink here. Okay, so now that we know how all of this works, let's begin moving the code here into its own JavaScript file. So again, in this main folder here, actually let's push this up to Git first, since we know our code is working right now. So we have a working version of it. Let's clear this first, and we'll do git add dot, and that will add all of our files here. And then we do git commit -m first working version, and then we just want to do git push. So now it should be up in the Git repository. Let's go check that out. Okay, and you can see here it says languages is HTML, so now that means we have some HTML files in here now. Let's click on main here, and yeah, our layout and our test file is in here. If we just open one of them, we should now see all of the text we have in here. Okay, so we've pushed our project up to GitHub now. So next, let's create a JavaScript file inside of this main folder here. Accidentally closed the whole thing. Let's call this file layout.js. Yeah, for now we can call it that. We can rename it whenever we want. But inside of here, basically, let's just copy and paste all of this code here. All the code, we copy it, we paste it here, and we press Alt, Shift, and F, and it'll just neaten up this file. So back here in the test, we just want to get rid of this whole script here. and we hit save, and then now we want to add the script tags again, but we want to add the one with this src. Actually, let's just type it in manually here so that everyone can see what's happening. We want our script tags, and inside of the opening script tag here we want src, and we set it equal to the name of our JavaScript file. So the name is layout.js, and here it auto completes it for us. So we save this, and now we go back and see if it's still working or if there's anything we need to fix. Okay, and it's still working perfectly here. There's nothing we need to fix. Let's see, what else can we do here? Now we want this to work by default. So we don't want it to start when we click this button. We just want it to automatically load up the template. So to do that, let's firstly get rid of this function here. So we want to delete this, and we want to delete this, and Alt-Shift-F to neaten it up. And now let's see if it just works by default. We also want to get rid of this button here, because now there's no longer add layout function. Save this. Let's head back and reload this page. And yep, it's just working by default here. And now let's test this out by adding some type of actual nav bar here. So I'm just going to do div style. Actually, let's import a CSS file up here. I'm going to create a new file inside of this main folder here, and I'll call it app.css, and here I'm going to say dot nav, and I'll say width is equal to 100%. Actually, let's set it to 100. View width, background color, we'll set it equal to aqua, whatever. Actually, let's set it equal to red. Red is a good color. Color will be gold, and yeah, let's leave it as at that. This div up here, we're going to, this is in our layout file. This div up here, we're going to give it a class of nav, which is what we just created. And in here, let's put a couple of links here. We'll just use hash, and I'll call this home or whatever. And let's duplicate this twice. So here for the second link, we'll call it about. And for this third link, we'll say contact. And we save this. Let's reload that page. Okay, now we have these three links up here, and I forgot to link the CSS file here. So link, and the file was app.css. Now notice here we're only linking the file in our layout file. We're not linking it in any other file here. And that's the beauty of this layout system. We can create one layout inside of the layout file, and then in all of our other files we only need to create the content. So I'm going to head back and refresh here, and now we have this. And it looks a bit ugly, so let's do, actually I don't think even this gold color is working here. Let's get rid of this, and down here I'd say dot nav a. So we're targeting the a links here. And to say color is gold, text decoration is none, and at the top here for the nav we want padding of 20 pixels and margin of 0. So let's save this and head back. Okay, it kind of works. We still have some type of margin here. Not sure where it's coming from, and I don't really want to fix it right now. But you get the idea. We now have a nav bar up here. Now if we were to create another page here, I'm going inside the main folder, I'm going to create another page, and I'm going to call this about.html. In here, all we would need to do, hopefully this works, all we need to do is we need to create a div with the ID of app, and then in here we need to type something like h1, this is the about page, and then down here at the bottom we need to do script, and inside of the opening script tag we need to do src, and we need to import that script, which is layout.js, right? And in our layout file, let's connect that up here. So on the about page, we want to connect that to about.html. Now hopefully, fingers crossed, everything works. When we click on about here, the content here should change to about page, but we should still see this nav bar at the top, and this is our footer at the bottom. So let's test this out. Oh, I forgot to reload the page here. Let's test this out. And yeah, it says this is our about page, and we still get the nav bar at the top, and we still get the footer at the bottom. So now we can confirm that everything is working. We can always fix up the CSS here. I think the problem is this view width here, but I don't want to touch it right now. This is not a CSS tutorial. You can always fix up this header here and also fix up the footer if you want a proper footer. And yeah, this is how we would use a template or create a template system. What else? Let's just connect this home page with the, where is it? What do we call it? Test.html. So now we can switch between these two pages. And it keeps the same layout between the pages. So I hope everyone enjoyed building this project with me. I know most of you don't watch it while it's live. You're going to watch this live later on. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed building this. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.